What's up, boys, friends, family? Hello. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to the channel. My name is More Than Moral. You can call me Moral, you can call me Copper, but the channel, More Than Moral TTV, it's after our Twitch channel, which I stream live on 3 days a week. Lately, we've been streaming Tower of Fantasy, we've been streaming Roller Drome, we've been streaming Genshin, we've been streaming Apex. We stream all sorts of stuff. It's kind of a variety endeavor. I like indie horror games, I like indie games, I like first-person shooters, I like all kinds of things. I like music and art. I'm planning on making live content. I like all sorts of stuff. If you don't know anything about me, if you're kind of new to the channel, I'm not going to do a whole intro video. I'm actually here to talk about specifically Tower of Fantasy. It's a game that I want to cover. It's a game that I'm playing right now. I'm having a lot of fun with. I see a lot of potential in it. I see some problems and issues and things that I really don't like about it, but I also see some things that I really enjoy, some reasons I want to keep playing it. And I'm going to get into like 18 minutes of talking about that. And I'm going to have some video footage in the background just so you don't have to stare at me talking for 18 minutes for my first video. With some gameplay in the background to keep our monkey brains occupied, I think it'll flow nicely. I might have some little interruptions to correct things if I was wrong about anything, which, I mean, I'm not gonna say I'm 100% right. It's not a completely objective video. There is some opinion in there. I think there is some objective look, some opinion, but if you don't know anything about me, I'm a music producer, an audio engineer, a sound designer. I love making music. I love instrumentation. I love all of that stuff. All that stuff's really important to like my core. I don't know what it is, but when I hear drums, when I hear music, when I hear stuff artistically that is good, even if it's not elaborate, it can be simple, it can be elaborate, it can be any of that. I just love music. I love technology. I love games, and I want to make content on it. I want to make content on the stuff I'm passionate on. But let me get back to the main reason why I'm making this video. I think there are some really good, some really bad, and some really dangerous aspects to Tower of Fantasy. If you don't know anything about Tower of Fantasy, it's a shared open world MMORPG. You kind of share it with several people that you see sometimes. It's not like a typical MMO where you're, you know, surrounded by people all the time in different hub areas. You'll see people occasionally. The MMORPG part of it kind of comes in with the crews, which is a guild system where you link up with your friends, you link up with people you meet, you link up with randoms, and you go and you do world bosses, you do daily content, you do exploration content, whatever the content may be. Most of it, if not all of it, you can do with your friends, with your guildmates, with complete strangers that you just meet. There's a world chat, a guild chat, whisper system, etc., etc. But it's also a gacha game, which if you don't know anything about gacha games, this is not the video to explain all of what a gacha game is. That's kind of a more elaborate thing that would take explaining, but let's just simplify it for now and say it's a system where you pull, roll, gamble for essentially characters in the game to try to get the ones that you want. It's addictive for a lot of people. It can be kind of dangerous, but it's really fun for people who, you know, have some self-control, aren't going to spend all of their money or have a lot of money to spend that they want to spend on these kind of games. People like me, we're free to play. We don't play for necessarily the gacha or the gambling. How you pull for characters is where you can end up spending a lot of money. I'm fine with grinding games. That's stuff that I enjoy. I like exploring. This game has a lot to offer with its exploration, combat. It's very free to play friendly. And I had a long, almost over an hour conversation with my Twitch chat about Tower of Fantasy, about where I was at on it. I was looking through YouTube. I was kind of hunting for some opinions to see what everybody was thinking. And I really couldn't find a lot of what I was feeling about the game. I know that the community at large feels maybe similar to what I feel. There's a lot of people who will fight to the grave and pretend that the game is perfect, and I'm Definitely not one of those people. There's a lot of people who will dog the game and say the only thing that it is a Genshin clone. I'm also not one of those people. There are a lot of similarities between this game and Genshin. I think that it does at times feel like a cheap Chinese version of Genshin, but I also can recognize that it has its own unique systems. It has its own unique things that make it a unique game, even if it does feel like it is a cheap version of a lot of other games that we've played, like Far Cry, Genshin, any MMO that you've ever played. It has, you know, weak story, good combat, flashy graphics, stuff you'd expect from a type of game like this, you know what I mean? But it also has some unique systems, but I don't have to over explain here. We'll get into that. Before we do get into that though, if you're new here, if you're not new here, if you enjoy gaming content, if you enjoy IRL content, if you enjoy opinion pieces, if you enjoy documentary style videos, if you enjoy anime, video games, music, any of those things, consider subscribing to the channel. Consider hitting the like button. Anyways, enjoy the rest of the video. Let me know what you think. Don't be afraid to have a conversation in the comment section. That's what it's for. Understand also that this is a large opinion piece, right? I think there are some objective things. I think there's a lot of opinion things. If you don't agree with that, that's fine. That's totally fine. We can have different opinions, but do be respectful. I'm going to be respectful of y'all. Do be respectful of me, my community, etc., etc. Enjoy the rest of the video. So Tower of Fantasy, I'll start out with the things that I think are really good about the game, or at least like the positives, right? I don't want to just like trash the game. That's not why I wanted to wait and give my whole opinion, was to just like roast the game into flames. Because I do think there are some good things about the game. So the first thing I really... I think everybody noticed it right when the game came out, is that the gacha system was really, really forgiving. You could get SSR units, and you had pity for SSR units, and there were multiple banners, and you get pulls all the time from every location, from exploring, from doing the achievements, from doing everything. You're getting pulls in Tower Fantasy like all the time. And I think new gacha games tend to do that. They really tend to give you a lot of pulls at the start, and then you kind of run dry. But Tower Fantasy really is a great free-to-play game. And as somebody who is a free-to-play gacha person, that is a huge bonus for me. You know what I mean? Because I do not like wasting money on things. I am not somebody who has an inkling of gambling addiction. I don't care. It doesn't give me that high that traps a lot of people. It doesn't make me feel like, wow, I have to keep doing this. I could care less. Like whenever I want something, but I'm willing to play the game for extended periods and save up. You know what I'm saying? So you're not Danny is what you're saying. Exactly, bro. I'm not gonna spend thousands of dollars on a gacha game. The most I've spent on a gacha game is 200 bucks. All right, so gacha system, great. Pity system, great. I think that giving an SSR after 80 pulls, top tier. And if you get an SSR before those 80 pulls, it doesn't reset your pity, which is huge, bro. It's big. I love that. That's great. For a free-to-play person who most of the time gets pretty lucky in gacha games, that's a really huge bonus that it does not reset your pity. Like, I think that's a gigantically underrated thing. So gacha system, free-to-play aspects, great. I love that for the game. I think that's great. I'm a free-to-play person, so I love that. Characters and art design is the next thing that I wrote down. I think the design for the characters, the combat design, the way that you can use the character that you customized instead of using the weapon character that you pull for is great. Let me get into what that means though. Let me break it down for the people who are going to be watching this later, right? So whenever you pull in Tower of Fantasy, you're pulling for a weapon. And whenever you get that weapon, you get a character that's attached to that weapon called a Simularca. The Simularca is basically the person who wielded that weapon the best in the history of the weapon. And you can use them as a skin, but you can also just use the weapon and use the character that you created in character creation, which is great. Like, for example, I don't want to use King because I think he looks like an edgelord, right? A lot of people like how he looks. That's fine. They can use him. I don't want to use him, but I do want to get his weapon. I don't have to have King on my screen to use his weapon. I can just use my other character or use any of the Simularca that I've gotten. That's great. I love that. I love the design of the characters. I like that you can design your own character. I like the way they look. I love the combat and the way that it looks. I think all that is great. Really great stuff. It can be a little bit clunky, but I'm not gonna subtract points. It's good. It's great. I love it. I think another thing that's really solid about the game is that even though we're comparing it to a lot of different games right now, I think it's genuinely a fun game to play. And I think that's something that is highly underrated in video games. I think a lot of people play games like this because they're afraid of missing out rather than because they're having fun playing it. A lot of people will jump on a game to grind things out and then get tired of it, even if it's not fun, just so they don't get behind on things. You know what I mean? Especially with games in this genre. For me, so far, the discovery, the combat, the world, it's been really fun to play. Now, the story is trash, but it's fun to play the story because I get to make fun of it on stream. I get to be with you guys and say funny thing about the story, because the story is terrible. It's so terrible. It's so bad. In memory, it's probably the worst story I've played in like recent memory. Maybe not of all time, but it's the way they move from just like butterfly standard moments, really lighthearted, really standard, really chill moments, to very serious topics, has no nuance. It's really weird. It's very awkward. It makes me not care about the characters at all, but I do get to make fun of it, and that's really fun. The characters are cute. They look good, but other than that, the story's abysmal, which is fine, right? It's a gacha game. You're probably not playing for the story. And if you are, and if you enjoy it, that's fine. That's great. I think it's garbage. I think it's terrible, bro. Awful. And as far as good things go, those are the things that I've written down so far. That's it. I still have to talk about the bad things and the potentially dangerous things that I think come with this game. For the bad things, it's kind of a long list. For the dangerous things, it's a short list, but they matter a lot since I categorize them as dangerous things. They've got to kind of matter a little bit, you know what I mean? The start of the bad things that I have on my list is that the PC version of the game, it feels like a mobile game that was ported to PC. The UI has a bunch of tap to go here, tap to do this features. The start screen has the same thing, like it's expecting you to tap on things. The controller support is pretty terrible for most people's standards. They kind of hate it. It doesn't look great most of the time. Like the art design and direction are cool, but like the cutscenes, the blurriness and some of the banner resolutions, some of the UI specifically is awful. All of that stuff makes it just kind of feel like a mobile game that you're also playing on PC. I'm really grateful to have a PC version, but it definitely feels like I'm playing a super mobile game. It definitely 100% feels like a mobile game. I don't think there's any way around it at all. I mean, even their UI has mobile game elements. There's no way around it. You're never going to lose that feeling as long as that exists there. Another bad thing that I have on my list is that this game feels incredibly poorly optimized. I have a beast PC. It doesn't run poorly on my PC. I run it at 120 frames with, you know, occasional drops and stuff like that. But the heat, it's running terrible. It's heating up CPUs. It's running graphics cards into the ground where they should be able to run it perfectly fine. It's a terribly optimized game. If it's a mobile game, it should be running very, very easily. On a computer that has like a dedicated graphics card and separate processor and stuff like that, where phones, you know, they have a chip in them, but they don't have all of the specs that a computer can have. If a computer is struggling to run a game like that, the bottom line is just that it's unoptimized. Terribly, terribly unoptimized. All of these things kind of coalesce into the idea that I think the game was released a little bit too early. I think the fact that the UI hasn't been adapted, that the optimization is super poor, makes it feel like the game was kind of rushed out the door a little bit for global release specifically. And my theory as to why it was rushed out the door so quickly is because Genshin's 3.0 is going to drop soon. And I think they wanted to get their foot in the door before Genshin came out with their 3.0 version. It just seems like kind of an obvious thing to me, where a brand new global release for a game that is often compared to Genshin comes out a few weeks before 3.0 in Genshin, and it feels like it's rushed. I mean, speaking of Genshin, another negative thing that I'm kind of holding against this game, it feels like a cheap Chinese Genshin clone. Even though I said it is fun to play, and I do like the character designs and stuff like that, it does definitely feel like a cheap clone of Genshin, a cheap Chinese version. Genshin feels like a PC game that was ported to mobile most of the time for me. I don't notice that I'm playing like a mobile game. In Tower of Fantasy, it always feels like I'm playing a mobile game. If you've played the PC version of Genshin and you've also played the mobile version, there is miles of difference between the two. Miles. I've gone on vacation for a week here and there where I couldn't be next to my computer, and I had to play the mobile version of Genshin, and it is a completely different experience from the PC version. I don't think Tower of Fantasy feels like that. I think Tower of Fantasy absolutely feels like a mobile game. And I think because this game feels like a cheap Genshin clone, I am willing to kind of compare the two and stuff like that, because I think this game is going for the Genshin vibe, and I think it's very obvious. If I could find Genshin's combat system in another game where you mix elements, you have shields, you have to do all these calculations and stuff like that, I would literally play something else, because Genshin's artifact system is so freaking abysmal, bro. If there was something that I could experience that was similar to Genshin outside of Genshin, then I would play it, but there's not. Genshin is super unique. In my opinion, it has a adapted UI, it has multiple languages, it has great PC settings. Tower of Fantasy also has good PC settings. It has more options than Genshin does, as a matter of fact, but Genshin feels better to play. Tower of Fantasy has a ton of input delay. Tower of Fantasy has MMO level server issues where you could be somewhere else and still get hit by an attack that's happening over here. I've played a lot with you guys and will literally be like, bro, don't forget it's an MMO. It's an MMO. It's an MMO. Because the netcode in Tower of Fantasy and the registration on the servers is terrible. Tower of Fantasy is riddled with mobile issues. Even the localization in Tower of Fantasy feels rushed. And I actually asked you guys about this today, and it doesn't bother you because the game is fun and you really don't care. But for me, it's kind of weird. The game feels like a passion project where they're willing to give so much away for free. They're willing to put a really great gacha system in there. They're willing to put a combat system in there that feels fun to play. Even if it's not always tight and you get hit by stuff in other places and stuff like that, it feels tight and it feels fun and it feels good. But then you get like the localization issues, the UI issues. While you're exploring, your feet hit the edges of stuff so often when you try to jump over things. If you try to jump over a fence, or if you try to use a ladder on those little like archer towers where it has a ladder, have you ever tried to climb one of those in this game? It feels awful. Trying to jump over things, the ledge detection, the terrain detection, the countdown on the jetpack and on your other relics. The countdown on the relics is super annoying. There's so many things that are like, why, bro? They don't feel like they were thought out. So the game feels like a passion project, but at the same time, it feels like it was rushed or that they just didn't care. And the localization is another one of those things. The audio is another one of those things. I haven't even talked about the audio yet. I think if Tower of Fantasy was not gated, it would die within a couple months. And I think after the gate is gone, if they don't continue gating content, y'all are all gonna leave it. I think that people are just looking for a good MMO, so when something like this comes along, they'll take anything. I think people in the gaming space right now, especially, not just even the gacha gaming space, but just the gaming space in general, are looking for things to play. For me, I had a lot of fun on the first day, and then whenever I started looking, there were things that happened to make me look at the game more objectively, and I'll get into those things soon. That's all I have in the bad category. I'm going to talk about the things that I think are kind of dangerous about the game. The first thing is that if y'all didn't know, back during Tower of Fantasy's marketing campaign, they actually stole a bunch of assets from Honkai and from other games, and they stole separate creators. Like, there were creators on Bilibili who had made trailers for their stuff, and they stole the outlines for those trailers and used them in their promotional material and had to issue public apologies and had to go back and change all their promotional material because of plagiarism. They literally plagiarized multiple things and released it, and whenever they had to issue an apology and they had to change that material, they literally had to go back and kind of push blame and say, hey, we outsourced this stuff, so it's actually not our fault, but we're gonna change it. They stole stuff from multiple artists, multiple companies. They stole a whole video outline. And if you're watching this later, I will include a video of somebody who actually breaks down every single thing that they stole. But the fact that this game already feels like a clone of other games and they stole stuff from the same company that it feels like they're cloning stuff from, that's pretty dangerous for any game. That can lead to a shutdown. You know what I'm saying? And if you spend a ton of money on games like this and the game does something like that and does get shut down, or, you know, they have to go back on something, that's kind of a big deal. Besides that, though, if you didn't know that, now you know. Let me get to my final dangerous thing, which is it's the thing that made me look at the game objectively. It's the thing that made me want to have this whole conversation. It's been happening since the first day that the game came out. It's been taking me out of the game so heavily where I didn't even get to play the last couple days. The anti-cheat in the game is incompatible with Windows 11. And if you have Windows 11, there's a chance that every time you're playing the game, every time you open the launcher, every time you close the game, that your computer will blue screen. You're always at risk for BSOD, which stands for blue screen of death. It's a fatal Windows error, and it's a very serious thing that can damage your hard drives, can damage your SSD, can damage any components that are on, because it's a driver level failure that force restarts your computer and blue screens it. And I've had that happen since the game came out. The first day I played, I blue screened 6 times. The second day I play, I blue screened 4 times. And it's because of the anti-cheat. The anti-cheat is a driver level anti-cheat, and it's causing a driver failure that blue screens the entire machine. And they have not talked about it. They have not acknowledged it. There are hundreds of people who are having this issue, and nothing's being done about it. They haven't said anything about it. There hasn't been a patch for it. Nothing has fixed it. And it means that if I keep blue screening, I can't stream the game because it will crash my computer and it will stop my entire stream. I issued some things that I think might have fixed it today, because I tested it today after some fixes, and I might have fixed it. So I'm going to try to stream the game today. I'm going to try playing it today because it is fun and I do want to play it. But if it blue screens, I will not be continuing to stream this game because I can't stream something that's going to blue screen and crash my computer. Those are my thoughts on Tower of Fantasy. Fun game, truthfully, but I listed a lot more bad things about the game than I did good things about the game. I think the game has a massive place for potential. I think if a lot of these things are fixed, then this could be a long-term solid pick. Looking at the game objectively is hard whenever the game's handing you stuff and you're just having fun and chilling. I think the longer this game goes on and the more people there are to look at it objectively, I think the game's going to fall off hard if it doesn't fix these things very quickly.